So this movie's been out for a while, and I've really been debating going to see it or not because I've seen how bad the reviews are. But considering the fact that I've seen every other movie in this franchise, I figured it was only right that I saw the conclusion of it as well. So here's my rant/review of Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. So Resident Evil: The Final Chapter is the conclusion to a 15-year-long franchise of the Resident Evil movies that don't really follow the game. But basically in these movies, there's this big zombie outbreak, and there's this main character, Alice, and she is a badass, and she's basically trying to stop this zombie apocalypse from happening. So to start things off, I would like to begin with the acting in this movie, which was very little of that. And the main character in this movie, Alice, is played by Milla Jovovich, and I have to say that I'm actually kind of a fan of her. Even though she's always the badass chick in the movies who saves the day, kicks a lot of ass, and kills a lot of zombies and stuff, she basically plays the same role across the board. I actually kind of enjoy her. But considering how everything in this movie really sucked, it really brought down her already subpar skills, in my opinion. Now, outside of her, there really wasn't anyone else in this movie that really mattered. I mean, they brought back a couple of old characters from the older movies, but that's about it, so I'm just going to leave it there. The plot in this movie is that there is an antivirus for the T-virus, which caused the original zombie apocalypse, and it's located in the Hive where the first breakout occurred. And Alice has to return back to the Hive to get the antivirus and basically save all of humanity. Now, at the beginning of this movie, there's a recap of everything that led up to this point, but if you've seen all the movies leading up to this point, I can let you know that by the end of this one, you're going to realize that everything that happened before now is basically wrong because this movie retells a lot of things. For instance, in one of the older Resident Evil movies, there was this scientist that supposedly created the T-virus, and he created the Red Queen, which is the defense system for the Hive, and he modeled it after his daughter. Well, Alice supposedly killed this guy in one of the earlier movies, but he's back in this movie, and you find out he didn't create the T-virus. One of his friends created it, and he modeled the Red Queen after his daughter. And stuff like this continues throughout this movie. Now, typically when I go into movies like this, these mindless action movies, I can basically cut my mind off so that I can still enjoy the movie. As long as there's some kind of good cinematography or some kind of substance behind it. But I hate to say that there was none here. This movie, to me, felt like it was a 90-minute action trailer, which leads me to the pacing of this movie. The pacing of this movie was god-awful trash. I mean, every scene was basically the same thing. There was this big action scene, and then the main character was knocked out, and then she wakes up, and she's in a completely different area with a completely different scenario going on. Then it was wash, rinse, and repeat for basically the whole movie. And with all this mindless action going on, if you're a fan of the franchise, then you probably still could have found enjoyment in this movie, except for the fact that the editing in this movie was just as awful as the plot and the pacing. I mean, every action scene, no matter what was going on, you had a hard time telling what was going on. Because what would happen is that the camera would zoom all the way in on the action, then it would cut 30 or 40 different times, and then you didn't know what happened until the next scene, and sometimes you still didn't know what was going on because, like I said, she'd be in a completely different location. Now, I also saw a couple of reviews before I went and saw this, and people complained about the 3D or the IMAX 3D, saying that it gave them migraines because of the way that this movie was edited. So I decided to watch it in standard format, and let me tell you, I still had a hard time seeing what was going on and understanding what happened. So the editing here was just pitiful. Final point I'd like to touch on is the visuals. This movie was shot in 2016, but the CGI and the graphics and the effects in this movie really gave me like a late 90s, early 2000s vibe, and I really don't understand that because the way technology has advanced, I really expect to see, especially in action movies, a higher level of CGI and graphics. So I was disappointed in that as well. Alright, so in summary, the acting in this movie was very subpar. The plot was confusing, and although they tried to throw in a twist at the end, it basically only succeeded in contradicting most of the story that led up to this story. The visuals were very outdated. They felt like they were from the late 1990s instead of 2016. And the pacing of this movie was confusing also. I mean, it just didn't make sense, and it was not cohesive. And not to mention, this is some of the worst editing I've ever seen in a movie, period. So with all that being said, this movie only deserves one rating, and that's a shit-tastrophe. And although I gave this movie my worst rating, I do have to say there's one silver lining in this whole thing. The franchise is actually done now, so they could actually reboot it and start over and hopefully stick true to the game. Alright, so that does it for this one, folks. So for the comment combo today, I want you to let me know what you thought of Resident Evil Final Chapter. It's been out for a few weeks, so I'm pretty sure most of you have seen it already. Did you like it? Did you hate it? If you're a fan of this franchise, did the conclusion ruin it for you, or did it give you decent closure? Whatever you thought, comment below and let me know. Now, as always, if you liked this video and you thought it rocked, like, comment, and subscribe to see more from me, Mike Proc. Later.